a discussion on the Exxon Valdez oil spill. This project is done by Anthony McCall and Bennett Bretches. Waking up on March 23rd, Joseph Hazelwood had no idea that he would be a part of the largest oil disaster in U.S. history. So a quick little rundown on what happened. The alleged drunken captain of the Exxon Valdez oil tanker on just slightly after midnight wrecked into a reef in Alaska, and we're just going to talk about the events that occurred after this happened, and it was the biggest oil spill in U.S. history. Then we're going to talk about what happened right after the incident in terms of cleanups, what measures they went through to get all of it out, and lastly, we're going to talk about the long-term effects that after this event created on the oil and gas industry for transportation and for tankers forever.
So what happened? So slightly after midnight on March 24th, 1989, the oil tanker Exxon Valdez smashed into Bligh Reef in Prince William Sound, Alaska. The captain, Joseph Hazelwood, had suffered from a history of alcohol abuse, so therefore he was initially accused of being drunk at the time of the incident. This charge was eventually acquitted, but he was still convicted of a misdemeanor charge of negligent discharge of oil. And the total amount of oil spilled came out to be 11 million gallons, which is about 350,000 barrels of oil. So what they had to do for the cleanup, so not only was it a tragedy for the environment, but the oil spill created a major risk to the food chain supporting the Alaskan fishing industry. So the spill's location was only accessible to boat and helicopters, so that kind of that compounded the cleanup process. So initially, the organization Alyeska represented the major oil companies in Valdez and assumed the responsibility for cleaning up the spill, but those efforts fell short. So the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, stepped in with three methods of cleanup. It was burning the oil, mechanically cleaning it up, or chemically dispersing it. And they very quickly prioritized areas in cleanup, like seal pumping areas and fish hatcheries. But animals were still dying due to contact with oil and or the loss of food resources, and this goes back to the food chain being messed up. So the long-term effects that the Exxon Valdez incident had on the oil industry. Well, basically, they took measures to make sure that something to this extent never happened again. And one of the biggest first step Congress made was the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. This act strengthened the regulations of not only the oil tanks, but also on the operators. Additionally, this act created the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund, which is able to supply up to $1 billion per oil spill. And as a result of the Oil Pollution Act, current oil tankers offered improved protection from oil spills, and they also had to improve communication between tanker captains and traffic centers, which just allowed for more streamlined transportation of oil. Lastly, the Valdez Principles are now administered by the Coalition for Environmentally Responsible Economies, also known as CERES. And they have become integral into the transparency of corporate practices. The principles address specific issues such as protection of the biosphere, reduction of waste, energy conservation, and public communications. And the final principle is concerned with reporting, and it has become one of CERES' most significant contributions to CSR. Corporations must agree to the following statement. We will conduct an annual self-evaluation of our progress in implementing these principles. We will support the timely creation of generally accepted environmental audit procedures, and we will annually complete the CERES report, which will be made available to the public. And so, as you can see, it had a far-reaching the Exxon Valdez incident had a far-reaching grasp on the oil industry.
And our conclusion here was the Exxon Valdez oil spill was a disaster of epic proportions. However, the long-term changes that have been made have changed the oil industry for the safer and the better.